Okay, well, good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the state today. My name is Bob Murphy, and thank you for joining us for this monthly mediation forum. I'm a Supreme Court certified family, circuit, appellate, and county mediator, also a qualified arbitrator and a member of the Florida Bar. And I get the privilege of moderating this forum today for the Alternative Dispute Resolution section of the Florida Bar. If you're not a member of the ADR section, I encourage you to join this dynamic group. Our membership is comprised of mediators, arbitrators, and attorneys who participate in various forms of dispute resolution. The Alternative Dispute Resolution section offers valuable resources, networking opportunities with others who are leaders in the field of ADR. There's some housekeeping matters. If you choose during this session to ask questions of the speakers or you need technical assistance, please utilize the chat feature inside Zoom, and the presenters will answer all questions at the end of the program. This program is being recorded. I think you heard that. It can be reviewed later on the ADR Section's YouTube channel. That's a good resource for you. And for CLE credit, you need to, of course, log into the Florida Bar Members portal, enter your own CLE credit. The course number for today is 9442, and there'll be 1 hour of general CLE credit with 0.5 ethics credit awarded for this session. And the course also qualifies for a cultural diversity CME credit, which does not require a course number, and as you know, is self-reported for the purposes of your renewal with the DRC when that comes up. I now have the privilege of introducing our speakers. Our first, one of our speakers is George F. Knox. As a respected attorney, business leader, and community leader, George Knox was instrumental in shaping South Florida's diverse economic landscape. Both behind the scenes and on the record, Mr. Knox has helped establish many of Miami's signature experiences and enterprises. He was a city attorney for the city of Miami from 1976 through 1982 and was in private practice, specializing in public policy and local government operations. Mr. Knox served as a visiting faculty member at the Florida International University College of Law between 2010 and 2014, teaching courses in negotiation and mediation. He was a member of the faculty at the University of Arkansas School of Law. George Knox currently maintains a private arbitration and mediation practice that features honest reflection and advanced relationship-based negotiation techniques. These techniques are most effective in matters where disputes involve policy or ideological differences, intense emotional dynamics, or where race, ethnicity, or culture may be factors affecting the resolution. His outstanding civic service has won Mr. Knox numerous awards and honors. The George F. Knox Living Legend Award was established at the Florida International University College of Law in April 2015. Mr. Knox has been designated as a recipient of the William M. Hovler Award, awarded by the University of Miami School of Law, which honors an individual for ethics, leadership, and public service in the legal profession and public service. Another speaker is Cristina Maldonado. She's a mediator and arbitrator with Maldonado Mediation and Law, Inc., a Florida qualified arbitrator since 2020. She has served as a Florida Supreme Court certified mediator in circuit civil, county, dependency, and family since 2010 and has mediated over 2,500 cases. Ms. Maldonado is passionate about the field of dispute resolution. She's a primary trainer approved by the Florida Dispute Resolution Center in the areas of circuit civil, dependency, and family mediation, and an associate trainer in county mediation. Ms. Maldonado is regional co-chair of the American Bar Association's Alternative Dispute Resolution Section's Women in Dispute Resolution Committee. Ms. Maldonado is the immediate past chair of the Florida Bar ADR Section. In 2020, the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court appointed her to the Mediator Qualifications and Discipline Review Board. In 2023, the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court appointed her to the Mediator Ethics Advisory Committee. Whether she's working on a family dispute or a commercial case, Ms. Maldonado's mediation philosophy is to meet people where they are and work with all sides to try to build a better way forward. Ms. Maldonado has a BS from Amherst College, a master's in conflict resolution from George Mason University, a JD from St. Thomas University School of Law, and is fluent in Spanish and Portuguese. She is currently serving as the Director of Externships and Associate Professor at Nova Southeastern University, Shepherd Broad College of Law. Our final speaker, Megan Moschell, is a third-generation attorney based in Miami and practices in the area of estate planning and probate administration with her father in their law practice of Moschell and Moschell. She is a Florida Supreme Court certified circuit civil and family mediator and a Florida Supreme Court certified arbitrator. Megan also attended law school and graduated with a Juris Doctorate from the Shepherd Broad Law Center at Nova Southeastern University. During her time there, she participated in the Alternative Dispute Resolution Clinic, where she received hands-on mediation experience and training. Megan has been a past speaker at the Dispute Resolution Center's annual conference, as well as a CLE speaker for the ADR section of the Florida Bar. She's a vice chair of the Probate and Guardianship Committee for the Miami-Dade Bar and a member of the Executive Council for the Alternative Dispute Resolution section, where she is chair of the CLE Committee and Communications Committee. Megan has also taught alternative dispute resolution topics at our alma mater, Nova Southeastern University's Shepherd Broad Law Center, and serves as a bar exam coach with her program Last Call Bar Exam, helping people pass Florida and UBE exams. She opened her mediation firm, Miami Mediation Group, in 2017 and has been mediating disputes throughout Florida ever since. She primarily mediates probate and guardianship disputes, first-party property claims, and general civil litigation claims. Above all, Megan strives to be a creative problem solver to help parties develop a concrete plan to move forward towards resolution. Welcome to all of our speakers.
Thank you so much, Bob. I am going to go ahead and what am I going to do here? I'm going to go ahead and move to our next slide because we have a self-reflection activity for you all. So this is peeling the onion, and we'll give you just a couple of minutes to review this page and to complete each category with a word or phrase that describes you at the present time within these categories. So think thoughtfully about something that would describe you within these categories, and we'll give you just a couple of minutes to do that, and we'll discuss later, um, you know, what this may reveal or how it may make you feel. I should add that if you would like to work on this later as well, a little more thoughtfully with more time, you can always do a screenshot, or you can let us know if you would like this in a Word document, and you can email flabaradr@gmail.com and we'll send it to you. Okay, I'll give it about another 30 seconds. All right. Again, we're happy to send that to you, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Christina, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about implicit bias.
Sure. Thank you, Megan. And I just have to say that I am really just honored and happy to be presenting with George and Megan, who are two of the most caring and thoughtful and just brilliant people who I have in my life, who do nothing more than add light to this world. And the two of you are just very special to me. So thank you for like, this is it's a good heart and a good triangle, right? And to all the friends who are joining us here today as well. So implicit bias is always a fun topic. I feel like you can get away without, raising people's defensiveness when you start talking about perception bias or, whether, in-group, out-group, or, any other kinds of, loss aversion, all of the other cognitive biases that are out there that we know about and run into as neutrals on the regular. But when you start talking about implicit biases and you start tying it to the different categories of identity, then you automatically start hitting a bit more of a rough patch of road, because people have feelings about whether they feel safe having that discussion at any given time. And there are some things about each of us that other people can see, some people about ourselves that only we can see, and some things that we have to tell people in order for them to be able to see. So, and then there's a choice as to whether we're sharing or not in those instances. And so some of the characteristics on that list, they're very fixed, and some of them can change over time. So I think it's a good place to just kind of start. Actually, Megan, if you could pull the slide back up again, I think it helps to just kind of have the list. I call the exercise peeling the onion because years ago, the very first movie, Shrek, which is all about an individual who other people judge by the outside of his appearance and don't get to see the whole person, right? There's this whole speech where he and his friend the donkey are in the field of sunflowers, and Shrek is sitting there going, ogres are like onions, they have layers. And so that's sort of what gave rise to the idea of peeling the onion for this exercise. So let's just go down the list and sort of think about what these could look like, right? When you put down gender, the other term that comes up when we're talking about gender is also sex, and sex is the preferential term for a biological form, and gender is more speaking about the behavior, the cultural traits, the physical traits, aisles in the toy line, in the toy store, that kind of thing, and identifying whether as female or male, and additional options. I remember in 2002 reading a novel called Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides about an intersex person, a person who's born with both biological parts. And I think that took me from a more traditional, there are two options thinking, to, hey, there might be something else in this conversation. And I think younger people have a better skill set potentially for having this conversation, but the idea of variety, both biological and social and cultural, is one that is part of the broader conversation now. You have a cisgender person, who refers to a person whose gender identity corresponds to the sex of the person of that person as they identified at birth. A transgender person has to do with a person whose gender identity is the opposite of what they had at birth. And so there are different ways that people can identify in this category, depending on what it is that any of you put down, right? So let's look at number 2. And so age is, in many ways, it's how many times have you been around the sun, or what decade of life do you find yourself in? I became the parent of a teenager yesterday. So, there are some numbers that have feel heavier than others. But then there's sort of like the bigger categories. Are you young? Are you old? Are you in the middle? How does the world treat you as a result of the category and that you find yourself in there, as far as your age? Do you think it's rude for people to ask you your age? Are you fine with sharing it? Looking at ethnicity. Ethnicity relates to large groups of people who are classified according to common racial, national, tribal, religious, linguistic, or cultural origin or background. And so it has a lot to do with country, nationality, or language, or food, or a lot of people manifest, or holidays, people manifest their ethnicity in many ways related to that area. When you're looking at race, it's defined as any one of the groups that humans are often divided into based on physical traits regarded as common among people of shared ancestry. And so these are all, by the way, literally the Merriam-Webster definitions that I just pulled just to have as objective a statement on these as I could. Then again, if you look in the one of my students was like, this is like the doctor's office checkboxes or the census checkboxes. And so in the 2020 census, the categories under race were white, origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa; Black or African American, origins in any of the Black racial groups of Africa; American Indian or Alaska Native, origins in the original peoples of North and South America. The book 1492 is a particularly good one to look into that. Asian, origins in the Far East, Southeast Asia, or Indian subcontinent; Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, the peoples of Hawaii, Guam, Samoa, or the other Pacific Islands. Just briefly, in terms of of Native American, in our community here in Florida, we have the Seminole Indians and the Miccosukee Indian tribes, but they are the heirs of the Calusa and the Tequesta if you go far in the back. So, and these are things that we don't always think about every day. And then there's sort of the catch-all category of some other race. For the 2024 census, there are some proposed changes. There were some proposed changes that went in place for Hispanic or Latino, which had historically been an ethnicity. But the idea now is to integrate that as a co-equal category for race and ethnicity, and to add Middle East or North African heritage. So moving down here to number 6, skin tone. In your racial and ethnic group, are you considered a person who is darker or lighter than the other people in your group? And does this impact how people relate to you? And if so, how? So is that a way that changes the way that people behave towards you? Under geography, Florida is a place that gathers people from lots of different places. So I think of, Florida is probably on the list of geography here, but there's possibly a comma there, and other places as well. What parts of the world have shaped you? Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Where have you spent a significant amount of time? Even if you haven't even been there, is there a part of the world that claims you nevertheless? How about religion? Were you raised religious? Do you consider yourself religious? Are you not religious? If you are, has your faith or practice changed over the course of your life, and in what ways? Economic class. This is a question that focuses on material resources. So think about what it was like when you were growing up. Growing up, did your family have more than enough? Did your family have enough? Did they have less than enough material resources, or were you poor? Has that situation changed over the course of your life? Education. How many years of formal education do you have? In what areas? What does that education mean to you? How much did that education cost you? Did you pay for it, or does somebody else help pay for it? Sexual orientation. As a person's sexual identity or self-identification as bisexual, straight, cisgender, gay, lesbian, pansexual, among others, right? So height or weight, how tall are you? How much do you weigh? These are in here because it plays a factor. There's never been an American president shorter than 6 feet tall. So we have a whole conversation about how people view folks with respect to body or weight, and the stereotyping that's in treatment that takes place. Language, how many languages do you speak? What is your primary language? What is your native language? Can you speak, read, and write in each of those languages? Do you sound more professional in one of those languages than another? And then how about physical ability? Are you limited in your physical abilities? Were you born with a physical disability? Did you acquire a chronic physical disability? Have you ever experienced a temporary physical disability? How much does it impair you? How can you address or accommodate it? What is the cost? And the category of neurodiversity, which refers to the variations and differences in brain functioning as being normal in the general human population. A neurotypical brain having some is sort of the most common presentation, but the idea of having a neurodivergent brain means that you have a different way of thinking and behaving in the world, not better, not worse, just different. So that includes autism, spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dyslexia, dyscalculia, Tourette's, dyspraxia, anxiety disorders like depression, anxiety, OCD, bipolar, or other sensory processing issues. And it could be acquired over the period of your life due to traumatic brain injury, stroke, or MS, epilepsy, similar impairments. This next category is hidden identities. There are many categories that we belong to that are important, but they might not be immediately visible. Think of, for example, your family structure. Are you an only child? Where do you fall in the birth order of your family? What was the structure of your family growing up? Did your family experience any kind of substance use disorders or alcoholism? Are you a survivor? Have you experienced any kind of conflict, violent conflict? Are you an athlete? Are you a cat person, a dog person? Are you a military veteran? What's your immigration status, right? There are all these different categories that are not always visible in a person's outside, that they belong to groups that are very important to them. And then the fun stuff, what is it that makes you who you are? So some of these categories feel safe to share most of the time, and some don't always feel safe or beneficial to share, because in some cases they can subject you to differential and potentially negative treatment. You could be exposed to sexism for reasons of gender. You can be exposed to ageism due to reasons of age discrimination. Ethnocentrism is one person walking around saying their group is better than everybody else's. Racism, similarly, one race is better than the others. Skin tone, colorism, the idea of colorism, where lighter shades are favored over darker shades. Religious discrimination, depending on whatever it is that your group you belong to. Classism, I don't know what education discrimination would qualify as sort of maybe snobbery, homophobia, or body shaming, or discrimination over height and weight. And so ableism, mental or physical, with respect to physical and mental differences. And so we have names, we have labels for and legal consequences in many cases for some of the different ways that people treat each other. Some are protected and some are not legally at the moment. So that's the big picture. But if that much can be contained in one single person, one single onion, think of how much room we have to both get it right and get it wrong, right? Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about the microaggressions or the microassaults?
Let me unmute myself. Thanks, Christina. That was a great breakdown of all of these, and I think plays into microaggressions, microassaults. I think microaggressions is the easiest one for understanding how we may have something that feels well intentioned but ends up really feeling harmful to the person that it's directed towards. So there's a video out there, and I don't want to take too much time to show it, but there's a video out there on YouTube. If you search microaggression mosquito, you should find it. And it's very short, but it's basically that there are some people, and I'll use my height as an example. You guys can't see because I am not standing on screen, but I'm about 5 foot on a good day. I'm pretty much 4'11". And whenever I walk into a social situation, usually not professional, although sometimes, but whenever I walk into, someone's going to say something about my height. I'm the little one, or they're going to make a short joke, or somebody will pat me on the head, even though I'm a 40-year-old woman, or they will lean their elbow on top of my head just to show how short I am. And that's a tame example, right? I'm not offended by it. It gets a little annoying sometimes, but think of it like a mosquito bite. I probably get bit more than the average person when it comes to my height, right? Little bites here and there. Whenever I go out, someone's saying something, right? Whereas an average height person is not getting those little mosquito bites about their height. Somebody who maybe has dwarfism might be getting even more bites than I am. Somebody always commenting on their height or asking them really invasive questions about, well, how do you reach things at home? Or how do you, we may think that we're being inquisitive or curious or, not even offensive. The things you say may not even be offensive. They may be neutral. But the idea is this person, because of this particular part of their layer, their identity, everywhere they go is bombarded with this part of them, with either a microaggression. It may not feel aggressive to you, but it might feel aggressive to them because of how many mosquito bites they are always getting. And so somebody may feel uncomfortable if they're walking into a mediation and you say, oh, we could just have you standing the whole time because you're the same height as everybody else when they're sitting, right? If we're talking about height, that might immediately, you may think you're just making a lighthearted joke or something like that, but it could really affect that person and it could make them feel uncomfortable, self-conscious right from the start. So think about some of these other things that on this list that may have more dire consequences for that person. Somebody may feel even more uncomfortable depending on what's being pointed out. As opposed to height, where most people I think have probably decided to brush it off. Like I said, I brush it off, but it stings a little bit sometimes, right? When people are just sort of staring and looking and saying, you're the short one, and again, that's a tame example. So those are the kinds of things that we should be aware of when we're in mediation, to not comment on the layers of people, to meet them where they are, to try to make people feel comfortable. And we'll talk later about how that plays into our ethical responsibilities as well. Christina, did you have anything to wrap up on this section before we move on to George? Oh, I think you're on mute now. Sorry, Christina, you're on mute now.
I'm right. I want to hear from George.
Yeah, me too. Me too. He's got some good stuff. George, we'll turn it over to you. And I know Christina might be sharing some videos here, but take it away with your portion here.
All right, thank you. And as usual, both of you have prompted ideas that are not a part of my prepared text. And I was particularly interested in the last two items on the list because I think they're one of my hidden identities. Sometimes is troublemaker or provocateur. And number 16 is the fun stuff is how much fun I have being a troublemaker and a provocateur. But a part of that is related in many ways to the idea of implicit bias. And my confession, if you will, is that I have a habit that was developed right after I left Jacksonville at age 16 to go off to college. Those of you, none of you on this call would remember, but the history is that Jacksonville has a notorious reputation during the decade that I was growing up of being an extremely racially segregated city. And my first racially integrated encounter and environment was when I went away to college. This was the very first time in my life that I had been in the presence of a majority population, especially to that extent. There were 40,000 students at Michigan State, and 400 of those 40,000 were Black. And the habit I developed was every classroom that I walked into, every professor that I observed, the first thing that I would pay attention to was how many Blacks? How many Blacks are in my class? How many Blacks do I encounter in the dormitory? How many Blacks do I encounter in the cafeteria? And that goes on to this day. To this day, I would look at a list, for example, a list of participants. And one of the things that passes through my mind very briefly, without even acknowledgement, as a part of my implicit bias based upon whatever underlying reasons I may have had for the original observation, I will do that kind of a census when I encounter any integrated group, especially where the participants are strangers. And so that leads to this idea of what we miss. What is important that we miss in connection with our focus upon what we say we're paying attention to. And the best example that I could find is the video that I'm going to invite everybody to observe. That's very short, but I ask you to also pay attention because it involves people throwing and catching a ball. And one of the questions is, how many times did the ball exchange hands among the people with the white t-shirts on? And of course, you get a prize from me if you guess the right number. So if I think
Megan, can you turn on sharing? I just realized it's not on. Sorry.
Oh, okay. If you can
give it a second, it'll be on a second.
Okay.
All right.
And I'm asking everybody, all of our participants, to count the number of times that they see the ball exchange between people with the white t-shirt. Here we go.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count?
All right, if you like, maybe you can put it in the chat or otherwise indicate how many times you saw the team in white pass the basketball. And did you see anything else? Take a second. And I'm gonna call you out by name if you don't respond. I got your list. I have the list.
We have someone answered 12, 6, 11, 13. And somebody spotted it, George.
Yeah, I see. All right, and those who spotted it, have you seen it before? Is my next question. So we have three categories. We have 1, how many times? 2, did you see anything else? And 3, have you seen this clip before? All right, now, here's the interesting part. For those of you who counted the number of passes and either were correct or incorrect and did not see anything else, we're going to play it, rewind and play it again.
The correct answer.
And the correct answer is 15. Now look at it again and look to see what else was present.
This video is from research by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris and is copied.
All right. Thank you for your assistance. Now, and there are two points that I would like to make. The first point is, on the numerous times that I have shown it, there was pushback. There was an argument that it had been doctored, that the rewind was different from the original, because there's a tendency that we have to not want to doubt anything that we identify as a failure on our part. We'll fight against that as our first instinct. And I think this is what's important. This is just one aspect of this question of implicit bias. My confession, my revelation that I do pay attention, for whatever reason, to how many Blacks are in an environment where I find myself. The concept is called inherited vigilance. Inherited vigilance. And this is probably frequent among people of color for whatever reason. And the thing is, the reason is not important for us so long as we've identified our tendency to do that, so that we can protect ourselves and others from that bias and any underlying motive or interest that is associated with that habit. And so the idea is that when we talk about implicit bias, too often we first think that this is either a flaw or something negative. We use the words guilty of when we identify implicit bias, when in fact it is nothing more than a subconscious reflex that saves our cognitive brain power some time. It's an instantaneous reaction that happens beneath our level of consciousness so that we can keep moving, so to speak. And to judge it, to evaluate it, to compare it, to see it as a preference that excludes others is sometimes an injustice to the concept. And as I've tried to indicate with the video, it allows something to be missing. Second aspect, I understand that the invitees also received a video that involved an incident that occurred at the U.S. Open Tennis Championship recently, when a Black American tennis player whose name is Taylor Townsend defeated a woman named Jelena Ostapenko in a match, and Ms. Ostapenko appeared to have been rude, gender insensitive in many respects, and certainly racially insensitive based upon some comments that she made following the match. The background is that Ms. Taylor had a ritual that she went through when the two opponents warm up and hit the ball back and forth to each other before the match starts. And Ms. Taylor had a routine that is different from almost everybody else that plays tennis. She starts out at the net and then moves to the baseline, and most other people do it a different way. And this appeared to have offended Ms. Ostapenko, and to the point that she suggested that that characteristic affected her game, and it could be a reason why she lost. And so at the end of the match, she shook her finger at Ms. Taylor and said, "You have no class, you have no education." And this was translated into an insensitive, racist statement that received worldwide attention and condemnation. And two things are important about that. One, which is a message for us. One was the response of Ms. Townsend to the outrage. And she said, look, here's what it's all about. Here's her own confession. There's a truth. And that truth is that this idea of ignorance and lack of education is a stigma that exists when people observe and sometimes perceive Black people as a class. when it's the furthest thing from the truth. And so there was a lesson in that as well. There was a lesson in conciliation, and that's the second phase, I think, of implicit bias. People do and say things based upon outright and utter ignorance. Here's a woman from the country of Latvia. Latvia is somewhere in Eastern Europe. She's devoted her entire life to nothing but playing tennis and going places where tennis is played. There's nothing in her education, her background, her life experiences that will make her sensitive to cultural things that go on, like racial bias or the perception of bias. And she had no clue. She didn't even, when people call her racist, she didn't even initially appear to know what in the world they were talking about until she became enlightened. And the second part of it is, once you become enlightened, what then is your reaction? And so we have all these things going on simultaneously, and it all represents understanding, which leads us again to our duties and responsibilities as mediators and the opportunities that we have to catch some of this stuff and to make constructive, positive use of it, even in the context of the mediation, especially when we have discussions, for example, about virtual versus live. And as I look at each of our backgrounds, for example, I receive an education about something about each of us in connection with the background that each of us chose for this particular setting. And it's true in every setting. And I chose books because my role today is that of teacher. And so there's a perception, there's a subconscious perception that I am endeavoring to convey. And that is, of course, you're going to pay attention to me as a teacher. Look at all of the books behind me. And this is the message that is always conveyed. And we keep that in mind in terms of, for example, our effort at providing comfort to people who can use Zoom, especially parties, actual parties. And we think we make them more comfortable because they're at home. At the same time, our setting, our background, our demeanor, our wardrobe, the language that we use could suggest authority and power and domination and intimidation. And it doesn't matter that I'm sitting in the living room with my cat on my lap when I'm being influenced by all of these other visual factors. And so all of these examples that I'm endeavoring to suggest have sort of three messages. And that is, it's not implicit bias that's the common enemy. Sometimes it's our own unexamined bias and our own need to acknowledge and act upon things that go on even in our brilliant mediator minds, because we are a super breed, okay, that we are not consciously aware of unless it is called to our attention. And the value and beauty sometimes of all of the things that we're able to catch, that we have even been trained to miss. And our capacity to listen with discretion and acuity to everything that's being said, because it is impossible for people to conceal truth when you get them to speak candidly, if you know what to listen for, without judgment or evaluation. And so the second is always listen beneath the surface. Always allow everything to come into your field of vision, and to be able to interpret symbolic transmissions so that we can understand what underlies people's behavior and the words that they choose to use before we act out our own implicit bias. And I will yield. Thank you. Thanks for the privilege.
Megan, you're on mute. And thank you, George.
Yeah, I was saying thank you, George. Always so insightful. So I appreciate it. Christina, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again. Um, you shared this really interesting graphic, and I wondered if you wanted to kind of go through it as we move into talking about some of the ethics.
So I have come to think of I've come to think of a fast way to encapsulate our mediation ethics conversations that we have and all the rules that we have all over the place in a way that I can simplify it for our students who I don't always have time to explain everything. So the best way I can think of to do that is to visualize it for them as a compass. When you're mediating in particular, your goal is to help people arrive at consensus, right? Being whether or not they see eye to eye, they have to reach a resolution. They have to, by mutual choice, decide that they have reached an agreement. Whenever there's any kind of an ethical question in mediation, my very first place to look is around the idea of party autonomy, of this idea of self-determination. And that to me is true north on the compass for being a mediator, because this is the thing that distinguishes mediation in particular from any other form of dispute resolution. It's the ability for the parties to make their own decisions and determine their own direction. That belongs to the parties. So the grounding is confidentiality, right? You're under the cone of silence. There are very few exceptions to that cone of silence being in operation. I see you smiling there, George. You get my Get Smart reference, right? So I just, the whole idea that you have that cone of silence or even like a bubble of privacy in each of the caucuses, so that you can create this protected place, but also everybody holds that responsibility to keep the privacy and choose collectively what gets out from under that cone of silence. It's different than other kinds of privilege where you can unilaterally waive it and not have consequences. People do unilaterally waive mediation confidentiality all the time by sharing, for other people without their permission, but that does open them up to some kind of sanctions or consequences, right? They risk that. Then on the East and West, we use these words very interchangeably in the real world. I think the idea of being neutral and impartial, we don't always think of them as meaning different things, but I'll credit Greg Firestone for teaching me this. And I really like the way that it sort of fits in my brain. So I'll share it. If it works for you, go for it. Neutrality is that the mediator is not advocating for a particular outcome. And the example you can get from there is putting a car in neutral. Florida is flat as a pancake unless you're somehow near the garbage dump around here. You got to get the car a push if it's going to go forward or backwards if the car is in neutral, right? So that is, where is it that you're going? What's your outcome? What's the end result? Where are you driving? If you're in neutral, you're not headed anywhere. And so the mediator is not giving that a push. It's being moved by the parties towards an outcome. Then the idea of impartiality is that the mediator has to work with all the sides and not play favorites between the parties. And I would even extend that to the participants, although it's the parties to whom we owe that highest duty, right? You can like one person more than the other. Just because we're professional neutrals doesn't mean we don't have an opinion, but it is your professional job to treat people as evenly as you can possibly muster, considering all of the things that you're working against. I think of it as sort of a slippery pole you're trying to climb on the regular, but there are lots of things that you can say or do during the course of the mediation that can affect how your impartiality is being perceived. And also the whole conflict of interest between people is definitely a factor underneath that. But impartiality has to do with how we behave with the parties. So I hope that helps, Megan. That's my compass.
And I'll add to, conflicts of interest. We have that the new guidance and rules that we did a
Yes.
program about navigating the new mediation rules. It's in our CLE catalog. But one of the things now is you really need to disclose who your social media friends are, because it goes back to that appearance of partiality. And, I was just scheduling something the other day, and I went on LinkedIn and I searched the attorneys' names just to make sure we weren't following each other, because I wanted to be able to disclose and allow the parties to decide whether or not I was the right mediator for them, or if their parties felt comfortable, because of the importance of that impartiality, and even the appearance of partiality. I consider these to be the 4 elements of neutrality. So no conflicts of interest, which we talked about; outcome neutrality, which Cristina talked about, for our neutrality; procedural equality; and then lack of bias, prejudice, and favoritism. And even though most of this presentation is talking about this quadrant here of the lack of bias, really all of this interplays with each other. And these are the rules that kind of guide us, and they're broad enough that I feel like it's a catch-all for a lot of the things that we've talked about today. So Rule 10.210, mediation defined. Mediation is a process whereby a neutral and impartial third person acts to encourage and facilitate the resolution of a dispute without prescribing what it should be. It's an informal and non-adversarial process intended to help disputing parties reach a mutually acceptable agreement. Well, in my opinion, non-adversarial, yes, it's not the process of litigation, but we also don't want it to become adversarial while everyone's in mediation, because things are said that put people on edge or make them feel like the fighting needs to continue, rather than being the peacemakers and not fanning the flames. And then even in the definition, we talk about that neutrality and impartiality. And then 10.330A, impartiality. A mediator must maintain impartiality throughout the mediation process. Impartiality means freedom from favoritism or bias in word, action, or appearance, and includes a commitment to assist all parties as opposed to any one individual. A mediator must maintain impartiality even while raising questions regarding the reality, fairness, equity, durability, and feasibility of proposed options for settlement. This is in our rules. Right. So they're talking about freedom from favoritism or bias in word, action, or appearance. I mean, that the peeling the onion that we talked about earlier. I'm just thinking of some real world examples. So it could be something as simple as, I know here in Miami, when I went to school in Tampa and started, people were shocked that I didn't address people by ma'am or sir. Right. Growing up in Miami, if I called somebody ma'am, they were highly offended, right? They're like, "Are you calling me old?" Like, I am not my mother, right? So ma'am was not acceptable. Whereas in other parts of the South, if you don't say ma'am, that's rude. So, those kinds of things, if a younger woman comes into your mediation and you say, "Good morning, ma'am," she might immediately not be so happy with you, depending on where she's from. So how do we fix that? We say, "Mrs. Smith, Miss Smith," right? Maybe we, still be polite and avoid some of those kinds of things, especially if you think that, that might be, or you just say, I'm, from the South. Good morning, ma'am. Excuse me if that, right? If you see the look of disgust on her face afterwards. Yeah, I was in a mediation once where there was a deaf person. So, being conscious of sometimes people will speak louder when there's a deaf person, and that's not necessarily how you're going to be able to communicate with them. Use an interpreter that's there. Use a translator. Um, for gender, and this really can play into some family mediations, addressing people by the names they would like to be addressed by, right? So some trans or non-binary people, they may change their name, potentially the name that they had, they call it a dead name. They don't want to be referred to by that name anymore. It could even potentially be their legal name still, but they may prefer a different name. But this can play into family mediations where Mrs. Smith may not want to be Mrs. Smith anymore. She may say, "No, please call me Mrs. Jones. I don't want that name attached to me anymore." And so by repeatedly saying Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Smith, that might put them on edge or make it seem like you are favoring the spouse in the family mediation by using his name that she took on during the marriage. there's all sorts of things. I know George had brought up something with voice of the client, which I know a lot of you are here coming from that program, about one of the parties and how they appear, even the elderly couple, the clothing that they chose, they were in the comfort of their home. And I know he talked about background. So all of those kinds of things, and what kind of assumptions are you making about those people, and are you treating them differently? Or are you remaining impartial and sort of saying, I'm going to separate those thoughts that I have about what their appearance means, or what their background means, so that I'm not partial to either party based on what I think is happening here. And then let's see. Okay, what if a mediator can no longer maintain their neutrality? Rule 10.330B. As soon as practical, a mediator must make reasonable inquiry into the identities of the parties and into other circumstances that could compromise the mediator's impartiality. A mediator must withdraw from mediation if the mediator is no longer impartial. So, this can happen if you really do feel like you are unable to remain impartial because of you keep coming back to a certain feeling or notion about a person. That might be something that you need to say, I need to take a break, or I may need to stop this mediation. And I think you're serving the parties if you have the bravery to do that, and to acknowledge your own bias that you might be having in a mediation. um, and I think we have maybe a minute or two to open it up if anyone has any questions, or anything that they would like to share, any of the things from our self-reflection activity that they found interesting, or would like to share. Feel free to go off mute. No? Good. Okay. If you think of anything, please reach out. It occurred to me while we were all talking that, Sherry, this might be a something where if people want to continue the discussion, we uh have a forum, because we do have free mediation forums every month for the section, and they're fantastic. They're the first Friday of every month, so potentially this could be a future discussion.
Thank you, Megan. I mean, I'm watching this group in front of me, and just, so happy that I got a chance to, like, be in this room with these people. And I really do want everybody to know that the Mediators Forum is, our forum. And so to the extent we have things like this that we want to talk about, anybody who wants to lead a forum, I welcome them, and I would love to hear from you.
Thanks, Sherry. So I want to close us out here, and I want to give a huge thank you to my co-presenters, George Knox, Cristina Maldonado. You both are just fantastic, fantastic people, fantastic presenters, so thoughtful and so caring and so passionate about the work of ADR. So thank you so much for being here, and for enlightening all of us today. And thanks to you all for participating and attending this webinar provided by the Alternative Dispute Resolution Section. Thank you to our for the introductions from Bob Murphy. He is new to our CLE committee, so thank you, Bob, for stepping in and helping us out. Again, the course number for the CLE today is 9442 for 1 hour of general CLE credit and 0.5 ethics credit. This will be up on our YouTube probably sometime next week, and we will also have in the description of that video, we're going to have some links to the videos that were shown, maybe some other videos or articles that we think might be interesting. So if this topic does interest you, if you want to keep the education going, go ahead and check it out once it's up on YouTube to see those links. Coming up for the section, we have our free monthly mediation forum. These forums take place on the first Friday of every month at 8 a.m. on Zoom. We also have our free monthly arbitrator forum, and these forums take place on the second Tuesday of every month. We also have a mental health and wellness CLE series coming up with a program called Trigger Points and Turning Points, with a fantastic panel on October 17th and another on vicarious trauma on November 20th. I expect to have those registration links very, very soon, but if we don't have them, please save the dates, because they are going to be fantastic programs, and I hope that we are going to be able to open up signups very, very soon. We also have a CLE about effectively resolving first-party property claims, which will be on Zoom on October 28th. And we also have tons of programming in our catalog. The links for all of these programs can be found on the calendar page on our website, flabaradr.com, and we hope you'll join us. We invite you to join the ADR section to receive access to more quality CLE courses and the latest news on dispute resolution processes. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you, Megan.